turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week.
Bill Maher has said. The bold comedian laid out his reasons for believing that blindly following communist ideas leads straight to trouble, doing it in a way that was both sharp and a bit unsettling. He also explained why, whether his critics enjoy hearing it or not, their views still revolve around capitalism. Let's just say Maher didn't hold back for even a moment. Things heat up quickly, so get ready.
Democrats must recognize that Zoran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? And if you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years. Now, Mamdani seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, lady?
Yes, despite Abigail Spanberger's warning, voters in New York still went ahead and elected a socialist. Honestly, this feels like classic behavior from the Democratic Party. They love discussing game plans, hosting press events, and giving polished speeches. But when it's time to pay attention to what people are actually worried about, they somehow miss it every single time. It happens in nearly every election. The party drifts even further to the left, insists everything is perfectly fine, and then acts stunned when the results tell a completely different story. Making things even more complicated is the fact that more than half of Americans have clearly said they do not support socialism. They don't like the policies, they don't trust the financial risks, and they're not interested in the chaos that comes with it. Yet the DNC keeps pushing the same ideas that voters are rejecting. It's as if the party just can't stop creating problems for itself.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Ma has been sounding this warning for years, just like many experienced political analysts. If Democrats want to stay strong, they need to move back toward the middle. The message is simple and honestly should have been taken seriously a long time ago. The party's focus on flashy intellectual debates has made it lose touch with what originally made liberal ideas appealing. Ma's point is that Democrats should step away from trendy causes that push everyday voters away. People aren't looking for long lectures. They're not excited by cultural battles. They want clear answers, steady thinking, and practical ideas they can trust. by letting go of extreme distractions and returning to the core values that once defined liberalism, personal freedom, fairness, opportunity, and sensible leadership, the party has a real chance to win back the confidence it has slowly been losing.
Problem is, Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will you. Because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked, like Kevin Federline.
We're going to keep stressing the same message we've shared on this channel many times. Every real-world attempt at socialism has ended badly. On the surface, the idea seems lovely, almost poetic. Someone new to politics might easily be swept up by the promise of total equality, shared resources, and a system where no one falls behind. But the moment you step out of the ideal and into reality, the flaws start showing. In practice, socialism runs into the same problems again and again because of how incentives and human behavior work. Any system can be misused, but socialism practically opens the door for it. Powerful individuals can twist it to their advantage, and people with little motivation can simply ride along without contributing. The fairness it advertises quickly gives way to corruption, slowdown, and economic decline. That isn't negativity, it's common sense backed by facts and history.
Run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess.
It's quite noticeable that younger people seem the most drawn to socialism, and when you look a bit closer, the reason becomes clear. Many young minds assume that anything they haven't seen firsthand must have been done badly or never given a real chance. History suddenly feels unnecessary. Past lessons lose their weight. They convince themselves that if something failed before they were born, it must have been because the people trying it weren't clever enough, didn't think big enough, or didn't have modern tools. This kind of thinking makes some believe they hold the special key to finally making an old, flawed system work exactly the way they imagine. It's a mix of optimism, restlessness, and the belief that today's goals can magically solve yesterday's problems. But there's a simple truth they often miss. Socialism didn't collapse because of the wrong leaders. It collapses because it clashes with basic human nature, and no generation, no matter how confident, can rewrite that reality.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Sooner or later, the perfect world they imagine, filled with endless benefits, total freedom, and no consequences, runs straight into real-life limits. Voting for grand promises can feel exciting in the moment, but everything looks very different once those promises start coming out of your own wallet. That alone should make anyone pause. With high living costs and heavy taxes, more people than ever are already leaving the state. And if these socialist plans become reality, that number will only rise faster. Even the loudest supporters eventually admit one thing about socialism: it never stops collecting a price. It's a bill that keeps coming back.
Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000. It collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
It's both surprising and worrying how the Democratic Party has drifted toward ideas that sound impressive but rarely succeed in the real world, especially since the Obama years. Instead of focusing on solutions that actually work, they often chase concepts driven more by ideology than by results. Take Kamala Harris, for example, who supports laws allowing biological men to compete in women's sports, even though the physical differences and fairness concerns are obvious. Bernie Sanders continues to back a single-payer healthcare system. While the idea seems noble at first glance, it runs into huge problems like overwhelming paperwork, high costs, and basic practicality. It's as if these giveaways could magically fix deep economic challenges.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy.
This topic came up recently while I was catching up with an old friend. It reminded him of something we've both been noticing for years. Ma often calls out certain policies that quietly reshape the country. Things like free programs, heavy government control, constant redistribution, and ideas that look amazing in theory have slowly woven themselves into everyday life. But instead of inspiring effort, many of these systems end up encouraging dependence. And now the effects are starting to show, creating a very slippery path forward. Our conversation and the way politics keep shifting makes one thing crystal clear. The Democratic Party needs to take a serious look at where it's heading. It has to step away from the socialists within its own ranks and return to steady middle ground ideas that most Americans can get behind. If it fails to do that, it risks frustrating voters, pushing the party deeper into extreme territory, and setting up the possibility for outcomes no one wants to face.
Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
There's really no mystery about who the unpredictable factor is in all of this. But even so, the situation at the border under the Biden administration can't be ignored. Kamala Harris's time as the border czar earned plenty of criticism, and not without reason. Ma pointed out that the border felt out of control because the rules were overloaded and the supervision was too weak. The planning wasn't strong, the follow-through wasn't solid, and the accountability just wasn't there. The system ended up stretched far beyond what it could handle. What makes it even more striking is the political drama surrounding it today. There still doesn't seem to be any real responsibility being taken.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that shit again.
Many people struggle to believe some of the claims made about socialist Democrats because they sound so extreme. Take the example Maher shared. Only those who could show proof of a negative COVID test were allowed to attend. Pause for a moment and think about that. Digital verification became the ticket for participation. It's a clear example of how far policies can stretch, even if it seems absurd or almost comical. And that's exactly the point. This isn't just an isolated case. It's a glimpse of what could happen if socialist ideas gain momentum. Such rules are intrusive, controlling, and often impossible to enforce, leaving people feeling frustrated and trapped. It highlights the gap between high-minded goals and the reality of their impact. You can see the pattern clearly. From strict COVID rules to unrealistic socialist promises, the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. While idealistic visions may appeal to younger generations, reality has a way of shattering illusions. History and experience show that no matter how attractive it seems in theory, socialism does not succeed in practice. If Democrats want to remain relevant, they need to abandon these extreme ambitions, return to the center, and focus on policies that truly help the majority of Americans. That wraps up today's video. For more content like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel.